I struggled, but their grip was too tight. These psychos dragged me into a basement and put me on a chair and then tied me to it. I looked around startled. What were they going to do? Then Jack said harshly that it was time to sacrifice me. What? No, don't, please. But it was too late. Jack drew his knife and swung it. This was the end. I never imagined that this could happen to me. A couple of days ago, there were no signs of trouble, but when I got home from work too late, Jared, my boyfriend, was beside himself with anger. He shouted that I spent more time working than being with him, and I could get infected from these homeless people. You never know where they've been. I wasn't going to listen to this, and I said coldly that I loved my job and would never give it up. After all, helping the homeless in the volunteer center was my life. But Jared exhaled noisily. Did they do your work? It was too much. I said over my shoulder, it's better than you. As I entered the bedroom, I heard the front door slam. Jared left, and I suddenly noticed rose petals on the bed. Stop. The candles were out, and the dinner was cold. Jared wanted to have a romantic night with me. What a fool I was. I suddenly felt so ashamed. He meant well. I fiddled with the phone, not daring to dial Jared, and suddenly I got a message from the boss. He asked me to come on the shift tomorrow on my day off. Exactly. At work, I always forgot about all the problems and felt happier. I immediately wrote back that I would come early. I would make up with Jared later. But after the first shift, there was a second and then a third. I couldn't make up my mind to call Jared, and I didn't have time. Helping the homeless as usual took up all my time. I was working for the 7th day in a row when I had to be replaced by another volunteer for the night. But when the clock struck 9, no one appeared. And suddenly my phone vibrated. I breathed a sigh of relief. It was the volunteer. Maybe he was late. But when I picked up the phone, I heard his worried voice. He got a flat tire and he wouldn't be able to come. Heck. I immediately wrote to the group chat center to find a replacement for me. Although I loved my job, I didn't want to stay on the night shift after 7 working days. I was tired and I was constantly getting sleepy, but as luck would have it, everyone in the chat was silent. I sighed. Apparently, I would have to stay. I couldn't leave the center unattended. The homeless people were even happy with the news. I worked for a long time, and I managed to make friends with most of them. We told stories, joked, and even did our own stand-up. It turned out that many homeless people had incredible humor. But still, something was bothering me. Gradually, as the night wore on, I began to notice oddities. A few homeless people returned from the street even more untidy than usual, and during the stand-up, someone started joking about cannibals. I thought it was not funny, but creepy. But all the homeless people were laughing. And then, when I told him to wrap it up, Jack, one of the old-timers, suggested we watch the movie. I smiled. Of course, comedy, maybe, or melodrama. But Jack suddenly broke into a terrible toothless smile. A chill ran down my spine, and he said he wanted to see a movie about sacrifice. I frowned, unease growing inside me, but he used to hate horror movies. He didn't say anything, just remained silent, smiling horribly. I was about to ask him what he wanted to see when Jack's voice dropped to a whisper. He began to offer to see at least something about dismemberment. A shiver ran down my spine. No way. I snapped that the entertainment was over for the day and tried to calm down. Although the evening was somehow strange, I decided that I was just winding myself up because of fatigue. Trying to force a smile, I said it was dinner time and started handing out chicken soup to everyone. Homeless people always loved it, and I hoped it would cheer them up. But instead, they ate it with a kind of displeased face. And when I asked what was wrong, Jack said chicken soup is delicious, but the human meat will be better. And wait, at that moment, I was really scared. Human meat? What? I barely managed to maintain my apparent calm. Homeless people never behaved like this before. I suddenly remembered the articles I'd read in college. It was about people without a home. They said that over time, these people began to go crazy and might even turn to cannibalism. I froze in horror. So Jack and the others? Were they crazy? Trying to force a smile, I quickly ran out into the hallway and dialed the supervisor. Beep sounded. Come on, answer me. But no one answered. Then I started calling my colleagues, hoping that at least someone would answer me. But everyone seemed to have disappeared. I felt terribly lonely. I was scared. At that moment, someone touched my shoulder. I flinched and spun around. Jack! He smiled wryly and said that they wanted to play hide and seek. I frowned. A child's game? Jack nodded. But then his smile turned vicious. He added, but unusual hide and seek. It's about survival. Whoever is found is eaten. I screamed, and Jack began to move slowly toward me. Anything but that. Terrified, I ran to the door and yanked on the handle. It was locked. God, what should I do? I pressed myself against the door. Jack was coming at me, and at that moment, the lights in the building went out. I looked around, confused, trying to get my bearings in the dark, and then an eerie otherworldly voice said, "The game is on." I shivered, my heart pounding. No, anything but that. At that moment, someone suddenly grabbed my arm. I screamed and yanked it. No, I won't let you eat me. My grip loosened, and I managed to writhe myself free and immediately took off for the hills. I needed to escape. The voices were fading, and I thought I'd escaped. But then I tripped over something and fell flat to the ground. Pain shot through my leg, and tears welled up in my eyes. Heck, I tried to stand up, but I almost whimpered in pain. Apparently, I sprained my leg. Tears welled up in my eyes. Despair gripped me. I can't give up. I needed to hide. I leaned on my hands and crawled forward toward the closet. With the last of my strength, I reached for the closet, grabbed the handle, and stretched. Almost done. But then it reeled, and the plates on top of it shattered with a clatter. I think I forgot how to breathe. My vision blurred. It was over. The homeless people began to crowd around me, grinning horribly with toothless smiles, and a chill ran through my body. Please don't touch me. We're friends. But they didn't seem to hear. They grabbed me by the shoulders and dragged me into the basement. No matter how much I resisted, it was useless. When they put me in a chair, Jack laughed angrily and suddenly took out something. The blade glinted in the dark. The knife. I was numb with horror and even speechless. Another homeless man took out an old book and said that I should be sacrificed to the god of home comfort. Only then would they have their own housing and they would finally stop being homeless. I couldn't believe what was happening. Could the homeless people I devoted my whole life to do this to me? I sobbed convulsively and shrank back into my chair as they reached for me. This was the end. And then I heard firecrackers, and I was startled. The homeless retreated and smiled happily. What was happening? Surprise! A familiar voice shouted. I turned around. My boyfriend, Jared, came into the basement, followed by the head of the center and the volunteers. They all laughed merrily while I was puzzled. What are you doing here? What's going on? Then Jared came up to me and took me in his arms. Happy Halloween, my love, he said, still smiling. Wait, I looked back at the laughing homeless people and it slowly dawned on me. So this was all a hoax? It turned out that I worked so hard that I forgot about Halloween, and the homeless wanted to give me a real atmospheric holiday. They persuaded the boss, and Jack and Jared, my boyfriend, were in charge of everything. Jared wanted to make up. Make up? A great way. He scared me half to death. I was furious, and my heart was still pounding. But then Jared came up to me and took my hands. He looked me in the eyes and said that during the preparation for the holiday, he understood why I valued my work so much. Even the homeless could become close friends for us. The most important thing is the attitude of people, not their social status. He spoke so sincerely that I immediately forgot about the anger and resentment and threw my arms around Jared. I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have reacted so harshly. I'll spend more time with you from now on. Because I love you. He smiled. I love you too, Clara. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you. I stopped by my house, but there was no one there. That's strange. Where is everyone? It's my birthday. I didn't recognize anything around me. The furniture was covered with white sheets, and the only sound was the ominous ticking of the clock. As if no one had lived here for a long time. Where did everyone disappear to? I went through all the rooms on the first floor, but my parents were nowhere to be found. I called them non-stop. But I heard over and over again, the number is unavailable. Mom, Dad, where are you? Trying not to shiver, I climbed the stairs to my room, but when I went in, I just didn't recognize it. Where are my things? There was a strange backpack against the wall, and unfamiliar posters hung on the walls. Then I noticed our family photo on the nightstand, but when I got closer, I was horrified. There was a completely different girl next to my parents and sister. Where am I? Tears welled up in my eyes. It's like I was wiped out of their life, and this was on my birthday. The day before, I invited my boyfriend Yu on a quest. I just adored them. I was constantly looking for thrills. Once I even jumped into a pit with snakes. That was a drive! But I had already been to all the quests in the city, and this time, I didn't expect anything special. But this was a chance to mend fences with you. We became very distant lately. We even talked less. Sometimes I thought he was going to dump me, but this evening was supposed to remind us how good and fun we could be together. The quest took place in some basement, and we went there. The management wished us a hell of an adventure, and we went down the stairs. I was hoping it would be a little scary, but it was a complete failure. The props were pathetic. Some sausage guts, plastic knives covered in paint. And on the way out, they hung an inflatable ghost. Are you serious? Just like a kid's matinee. I laughed and turned to you, but he wasn't there. Are you kidding? He was standing here a minute ago. Suddenly, I noticed the torn bracelet on the floor. I gave it to you for our anniversary. It seemed that our relationship was completely destroyed. You just ran away from me. I was very hurt because I loved you. Why did he do that? Completely heartbroken, I went outside and trudged home. While I was on the quest, my parents were busy preparing for the holiday. I was expecting balloons and gifts, but it was very quiet inside the house, except for the lonely ticking of the clock. Maybe it was a surprise, but I went all over the house and found no one. Not my father, not my mother, not my oldest sister, Joanna. Where could they have gone? I tried to call them, but every time I heard, the number is unavailable. The house itself looked eerie. The furniture was covered with white sheets, as if no one had lived there for a long time. I went up the stairs to my room, but stopped dead in my tracks. Everything here was different. There were some strange things. A backpack, posters. Whose were they? I tossed around the room completely at a loss, and then I noticed a photo. My whole family was hugging some girl. But that's impossible. It should be me. Horrified, I staggered back and dropped the photo to the floor. The glass shattered with a crash. It was like a terrible nightmare. There was no sign that I had ever lived here in the house. Instead of my favorite chair, books, awards, I found pictures of that girl and unfamiliar things everywhere. Had I lost my mind? My family still did not return calls. Gosh, what if something had happened to them? Then, I remembered that my friend's uncle Chris was a police officer. Maybe he could help me. I called Chris, and after a long time, she answered. Hi, Chris. It's Sarah. I gave her a quick description of the situation, and Chris said she knew something. The fact was that my family... She fell silent. Not again. Chris! Are you here? I shouted, but it was useless. The signal went dead. My breath caught in my throat. So Chris knew where everyone had gone. I immediately rushed to her house. I pounded on the door with my fists long and hard. No one answered me. As a result, a neighbor came out of the house opposite. You shouldn't be knocking. There's been no one here for a year. She grumbled. Where did Chris go? The neighbor replied that she moved out after the death of her friend. The old woman slammed the door. I didn't understand anything. Chris didn't have any friends, just me. But I was not dead. Chris, open up now. This isn't funny. I shouted, pounding on her door even harder. And then my older sister called. Thank God, but Joanne was so distant. Hello? I have a missed call from you. Did you call? Hey Joanne, it's me, Sarah. But my sister started screaming that I was a liar. Her sister had been dead for a year. It didn't make sense. Joanne, I'm here. I'm alive. But she wasn't listening. Joanne accused me of being involved in the death of Sarah. Her sister, in a voice mad with anger, she threatened that I would answer for everything. I frantically hung up. Joanne kept calling, but I was already so scared that I didn't pick up the phone. And suddenly, I felt that someone was watching me. I turned around, but there was no one around. I was shaking with fear, like I was in a horror movie. This wasn't the kind of 20th birthday I dreamed of. Not knowing where else to go, I went home again. It was late at night when I reached my home, which seemed even more alien in the dark. I was afraid to go in. Then I noticed a light in my room. Someone was back. Delighted, I was already running into the porch when the door creaked open. It was Joanne. She grinned maliciously, saying that it was good that I came to her myself. You will answer to me for Sarah's death. Joanne suddenly screamed and threw herself at me. I ran in a panic. What kind of trash is going on? Joanne, come to your senses. I'm your sister. But Joanne would drive me into narrow alleys and scream that I couldn't get away from her. Oh my God. I tried to call for help, but there wasn't a soul on the street. And then I saw a sign that there was a 24-hour coffee shop nearby. With the last of my strength, I rushed there. I ran to the entrance and yanked the handle, but it wouldn't budge. And then I saw a sign on the door that said, "We moved." It was all over. I looked back. I could already see the ominous silhouette of Joanne in the light of the lantern. Damn, I'm done. But then I noticed the same quest where I was with you. The basement door was ajar. This was my chance. I quickly ran inside and barricaded the door. But Joanne was pounding madly at it. I prayed the door would hold. It bent more and more from her attacks. It seemed that the hinges were about to fly out. A few minutes later, Joanne was quiet. Was she gone? But just as I let out a sigh of relief, I heard a deafening crash. Joanne smashed the door with her foot. Splinters flew at me, and Joanne's crazy face appeared in the hole with a twisted smile. Terrified, I raced through the dark basement corridors. I heard that Joanne was already inside, following me closely. In desperation, I looked around and shouted for help, but no one answered. Suddenly, I hit a wall. What should I do next? Joanne was already close. I had nowhere to run, and then I saw the closet. This was my last hope. I climbed into it and sat there, trying not to breathe, but I'd already heard Joanne come into the room. Come out! I know you're here, she ordered. Then I heard slow footsteps approaching. I couldn't move in horror. Suddenly, the closet door swung open. Please don't! I screamed hysterically. At that moment, I was blinded by a flash of bright light. Opening my eyes with difficulty, I saw my parents, all my friends, Chris and you. Happy birthday! Everyone shouted cheerfully in unison. Joanne winked. It turned out that you had long ago persuaded her to arrange a unique quest for me, so I was wrong to suspect. And you really loved me since he planned it all. He persuaded everyone. I love thrills so much. So, it was a hoax? I almost passed out from fear. I wanted to shout out what I should do with them for such jokes, but suddenly, my vision went dark, and the basement seemed to spin in front of me. I began to choke and lose consciousness. I barely opened my eyes. Where am I? What's going on? Then the doctor came up to me and said that I was in the hospital. I was brought here by ambulance. I felt very weak. Was I terminally ill? But the doctor reassured me that it was a faint, and now everything was fine. I was just very scared. You better cross-stitch and not go on quests, he joked. The doctor said I had a weak heart. Fortunately, I did have a heart attack. I felt very sad that I had brought myself to this state. In an attempt to tickle my nerves, I completely forgot about real life. That's it. No more horrors. At this point, anxious friends and family trooped into my room. They had gifts in their hands, and you even brought me a bouquet of my favorite flowers. Thank you, I said wearily. This is the 20th birthday I will never forget.